Welcome students to the SRBPS virtual classroom program. I'm Prerna Rathi, your biology educator. So students, in today's class, we are going to deal with chapter 15, that is biodiversity and conservation of class 12. In today's lecture, the key topics that we would be covering are biodiversity, global species diversity, patterns of biodiversity, and loss of biodiversity. So let us start our class. Chapter 15, Biodiversity. Biodiversity is the sum total of all the genes, species and ecosystem of a given region. The term biodiversity was coined by Sir Edward Wilson. There are three levels of biodiversity as you can see: genetic biodiversity, species biodiversity and ecological biodiversity. The biodiversity at genetic level is known as genetic biodiversity. The different species that are available are known as species biodiversity. Different ecosystems together form the ecological biodiversity. Variation of genes found with the species is known as gene diversity. Example, there are more than 50,000 genetically different strains of rice and 1,000 varieties of mango present in India. This 1,000 variety is based on the genetic differences. Then species diversity. The variety of species found in a habitat is known as species diversity. For example, the Western Ghat has greater biodiversity of amphibian species as compared to the Eastern Ghat. And I already told you, the variety of different habitats found in a particular area are called the ecosystem or the ecological biodiversity. What do you mean by global species diversity? According to IUCN, in the year 2004, the total number of plants and animal species described were about 1.5 million. It was estimated that the global diversity has 7 million species. More than 70% of all species recorded are animals, whereas about 22% of total account for the plants. There are insects. We already have studied in class 11th about the arthropods. Arthropods consist of around 70% of the animals. How do we measure this biodiversity? Well, there are three ways to measure the biodiversity. Alpha biodiversity. You can only count the number of species in a particular area. Then beta biodiversity. It is the comparison between two habitats. Gamma biodiversity. It is the measure of overall biodiversity in a large land scale. That is, when we are considering a larger area. For example, the entire Indian subcontinent or an entire continent. So that time we shall measure the alpha biodiversity. What is the importance of species diversity in an ecosystem? The species diversity study tells us that there are communities with more species which tend to be more stable than those with less species. This rule was proved by David Tillman. David Tillman gave the theory that communities which have more species tend to be more stable over a period of time. A stable community has the following important characteristics. Its productivity should not vary too much from year to year. Suppose this year the net primary productivity of a given field was some x gram per meter square per year. Then the next year also, if it is almost the same, we consider it to be a stable ecosystem. It should not have much variation in context of productivity as well as species. It should have resistance to seasonal disturbances like floods, droughts, etc. and also to invasion by alien species. Here, I want you all to note that the alien species play a very important role which we shall discuss later on in our presentation. Now, let us discuss the evil quartet of loss of biodiversity. The main problem with the biodiversity that we are facing right now is the loss of biodiversity. The evil quartet tells us about the four major causes of biodiversity loss. The first cause is habitat loss and also known as fragmentation. It is the destruction of ecosystem by unwanted human activities like urbanization, clearing the forest for some urban use, intensive farming, deforestation, mining activities, and so on. Also, when the vegetation is cleared for human activities like creating residential areas, habitat of some organisms are fragmented. This is called habitat fragmentation. For example, the Amazon rainforest, also known as the lungs of the planet, is being cut and cleared for cultivation of soya beans and for the conversion into grasslands for raising beef cattle, because of which many of the animals have lost their habitat. The next of the evil quartet is overexploitation. Yes, the excess of anything is bad. When biological system is overexploited by man for the natural resources, it results in degradation and extinction of resources. Example of extinction because of overexploitation are Stella's sea cow, passenger pigeon, and a variety of marine fishes which became the prey to the increasing traffic through the oceans and seas. The next is the invasion of alien species. Yes, as promised, now we will discuss it. Some alien or also known as exotic species, when introduced unintentionally or deliberately, both ways, become very invasive in a particular ecosystem. For example, the Nile perch, which is a very large predator fish, when it was introduced in Lake Victoria of East Africa, it caused the extinction of the ecologically unique cichlid fish in that lake. Also, very common example of such an invasive weed in our country is Parthenium, Lantana, Picornia crassipus, water hyacinth, which is called the terror of Bengal. The last of the evil quartet is co-extinction. Students, in the last chapter, we had learnt about mutualism, and there we discussed about plant pollination mutualism. When a species becomes extinct, a plant and the animal species that is obligately dependent on the same species will also become extinct. For example, if by chance an insect species which is a pollinator becomes extinct due to some natural problem, then the plant of which this was a pollinator shall also become extinct. So once again, let us discuss what we have seen in this presentation. We have discussed about biodiversity. So let us once again recapitulate what we have learned in this class. We have discussed, children, about biodiversity, global species diversity, patterns of biodiversity, and loss of biodiversity. I hope I have been helpful to you. Till the next class, take care.